Hey everyone, Professor Leis here. In this video, I'd like to walk you through the prompt for major essay project number 1. So let's go ahead and get started. Construct an essay of at least 4 full pages that informs your audience about a value that is important to you, establishes your personal definition of the value, and demonstrates an intricate understanding of how your personal history or experiences have contributed to its creation and evolution. So let's break this down and explain it a little bit. A value is a guiding principle or some sort of rule or moral or belief that you hold that influences the way you live your life, that influences the types of choices you make, maybe the political beliefs you hold, the way you interact with other people. It's something that is very important to you. Now, it can be something that is abstract, or it can be something that's a little bit more concrete. So, for example, it might be something like family, or it could be something like education, or love, or justice, or any number of different possibilities. But it's something that is really important to you and influences the way that you live your life. So you're going to identify one. Okay, so you may have several different things that you hold to be important in your life, but for the purposes of this essay, you're just going to choose one, probably the most important one, the most important guiding principle you have or value you have. And so what you're going to do is you're going to provide a personal definition of this value. What does that mean? How do you define whatever it is that you're choosing to be your value? You can use an actual dictionary definition of it to help with your definition, but you want to make sure that you're inputting your own understanding of it, how you define it personally. So make sure that's clear in your essay. And then you're going to demonstrate an intricate understanding. So intricate understanding means that you've thought really hard about this. You've really explored it and examined the way that your personal history and experiences have influenced the creation of this value, and also the evolution of it. Maybe this is a value that you've had for several years, but over the years, as you've gained more experience and grown older, maybe that value has evolved. So you talk about that evolution, but you want to make sure that you're examining how your personal experiences and your personal history contribute to the creation of that value. So how has your history or your experiences contributed to the creation of that value? So that's really what we're challenged to do in this essay, to focus on our most important value, a guiding principle or belief that we have, provide a definition of that value for our readers, and explain how our personal experiences have contributed to the creation of that value. Let's continue. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all of the concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this term. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Habits of the Creative Mind. Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers. Try something new and exciting, follow your curiosity, take risks, and attempt to have fun while composing this essay. So, as you work on this essay, we want to make sure that we're thinking consciously about the things that we're reading and learning about from Habits of the Creative Mind. How can we input those concepts or implement those concepts in the way that we're composing our essays? That's really important to keep in mind. But I'm encouraging you all to try something new with the way that you compose this essay. Don't rely on old habits or practices that you maybe learned in high school or other English classes. We're trying to expand our toolbox, and in order to learn and grow, we need to take risks and try new things. And really, I'm not being sarcastic or facetious when I say attempt to have fun while composing this essay. I really do mean that genuinely. Try to look for the moments where it can bring you joy or excitement when you're working on this. It's not meant to be a torturous, grueling experience. I would hate for that to be the case. Okay, so let's look at the different challenges that we are faced with in this particular essay project, what we're trying to address and overcome as we work on this essay. So we're challenged to write an essay with a coherent and purposeful structure and organization, employing strategies learned in On Structure, pages 197 through 203 in Habits of the Creative Mind. So we want to make sure that we are thinking consciously about the way that we are structuring and organizing our essays. We want to make sure that the structure that we've chosen or selected for our essay is purposeful and coherent, meaning we've thought consciously about it. And so this is a section that we'll read from Habits of the Creative Mind that you'll learn some strategies for different ways of organizing or structuring your essays. So you want to try to learn from those different concepts and strategies from that particular essay in the book and see how you can apply those to our essay. It's not asking you to quote from the book. You're not trying to incorporate any quotes or anything like that from Habits of the Creative Mind. We're really just trying to apply those strategies to our writing process. We're challenged to include specific and relevant examples and or textual evidence that help develop a central point. So the central point that we're developing is addressing the prompt, what we're trying to accomplish in the essay. But in order to do that, we're going to need to include specific and relevant examples, of course, from our personal history and experiences, right? But also you may choose to incorporate textual evidence, meaning quotations from another text that you've encountered. So maybe it's a book that's important to you, or maybe it's something that you've read in another class that applies to the value that you're identifying, whatever the case is. So I'm encouraging you to try to incorporate textual evidence if that's relevant or appropriate for your writing project. But definitely we want to include specific and relevant examples from our own personal experience and history. We're challenged to write at least 7 purposeful and organized paragraphs, each one focusing on a distinct point or idea that helps develop the overall point of the essay. So in our class and beyond, we're going to move past the 5-paragraph essay structure. That was a great starting point, but it's not the end all be all for how to compose an essay. Sophisticated essays that we write in college are going to be much longer than 5 paragraphs. And so for this essay project, to help us begin to break out of that mold and think consciously about how many paragraphs we have and expanding our toolbox, we are challenged to have at least 7 purposeful and organized paragraphs. You can have more than 7, but you can't have fewer than 7. Okay? So that's really important to keep in mind. We're challenged to treat paragraphs as a unified progression of ideas rather than disconnected items in a list. So in our writing, we want to make sure that each of the points that we have in our essay is a link in a long chain of meaning. Each link connects to the other links so that one idea connects to the one that follows that one, and then the one that follows that one's connected, and on down the line. So they all lead into each other, rather than treating them as disconnected items in a list, which is what I call the listing effect. So you'll hear me say that throughout the semester. Avoid the listing effect. We don't want to treat our points as just disconnected items in a list. Everything should flow into the points that follow it. Everything should be connected. We're challenged to show a strong awareness and audience. We're challenged to show strong awareness of audience or reader. Excuse me there, that was a mouthful apparently. So what I mean by this is we want to make sure that we're thinking consciously about who our audience is and who is a member of that audience. So obviously I'm your most direct audience member. You're writing an essay that I will definitely read. But I want you all to think consciously about other potential members of the audience. So your fellow classmates are potential members of this audience. People who maybe are a part of your experiences, so family and friends who you might mention in your essay, those are possible audience members. People who care about the value that you're exploring, those are possible audience members. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about who is our audience, and we're addressing the concerns and the expectations of those audience members. We want to make sure that we are conscious of our situation that we're writing this essay in, right? We're writing it in a college English course. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining a level of seriousness. I don't mean to treat it as boring or stuffy or dull. That's not what I mean. But we want to make sure that we are we're taking it seriously so that our readers will take it seriously. So that's really important to keep in mind. And that will influence the tone you take. You don't want to have an overly casual or informal tone. That might undercut your credibility as a writer. We're challenged to have a conclusion that does not simply summarize the main point, but instead addresses the so what question. Why do these ideas matter? What's the overall significance? What can the reader take away from this essay? So an effective conclusion is not just going to be a summary of your essay. That's a carryover of the 5-paragraph essay structure. And remember, we're moving beyond that structure. So how can we compose an effective conclusion if we can't just summarize our essay? Well, we address what we call the so what question. Now, in conversation, when we say that, somebody says something to you and you respond with so what we mean is, why is that important? Why should I care about this? What's the significance? Why do these ideas matter? And so an effective conclusion is going to explain that to the reader. Why these ideas matter? What can your reader take away from this? So think about that in your conclusion. We're challenged to create a purposeful title that alludes to the focus of your essay. Titles are really important. Don't just waste your title. Think about it. The title is the very first thing your reader will read, right? And if your title is just a throwaway, you didn't really think about it, that might cause someone not to read your essay because they might think it sounds, not very interesting or doesn't, capture their attention. So have a purposeful title that alludes to the focus of your essay, meaning it hints at what the main point of your essay is. So somebody should kind of get a hint at what your essay's focus is just by reading your title. We're challenged to show ownership and pride over our work, taking care to eliminate major or distracting spelling, grammatical, and typographical errors. So this is something that is really important, and I want you to keep this in mind whenever you sit down to write anything, whether that's an essay for our class or an email to your boss or whatever the case is. The work that we put into the world is a representation of us as people, whether we like that fact or not. Okay, so that's something we can't avoid. People judge us based on what we express, what we show, what we put into the world. And so we want to make sure that the work that we do is a good representation of the work that we put into it, right? Is a good representation of us as writers, as thinkers, as students, as people. So one of the ways to kind of show that ownership and show that pride is to just make sure that you are taking care to make sure you're expressing your ideas effectively, clearly, don't have any careless spelling or typographical errors. That's really important to keep in mind. And then finally, we're challenged to format our essays according to MLA guidelines, 12-point Times New Roman font, double-spaced, 1-inch margins on all 4 sides with a properly formatted works cited page if applicable. So this is important. If you're not really familiar with MLA format, don't stress out. I will provide resources for you. But just the kind of basics of MLA format, it's 12-point font, so it shouldn't be any smaller or bigger than 12-point. Use Times New Roman. Okay, we don't need any fancy fonts or anything that's hard to read. Just Times New Roman font. Double spaced. Okay, so not single spaced, not 1.5 spaces, but double spaced. And then 1-inch margins on all 4 sides, top to bottom, left to right. 1-inch margin. They shouldn't be any larger than 1 inch. And then if you cite any sources, include any quotations from any sources, etc., you're going to need to have a works cited page. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so just a few more things here and then we'll wrap this video up. So our due dates for this essay project, our first draft is due Sunday, the 21st of February, and that's going to be 2 full pages in length, double space, and you'll submit that on Canvas by midnight on that day. The second draft is due Sunday, the 28th of February, and that will be 3 full pages, and you'll submit that the same way through Canvas by midnight on the 28th of February. The polished draft, that's what I call the final draft. I like polished better. That is due Sunday, the 7th of March, and that will be the 4 full pages submitted through Canvas by midnight on that day. And also you're going to submit a cover letter, and you'll submit that after you submit the polished draft on that same submission day. I'll explain what that is in a separate prompt, so don't worry about that right away, but when it comes time to submit that, the information will be available to you. And essentially what it is just a heads up on what you were working on in your essay, what you think you did well, what you think you need to work on more, what you'd like me to focus on in my feedback. Just the final note here, for this major essay project, you must submit all drafts by expected deadlines in order for this project to be considered complete. If you cannot meet an expected deadline for any one of these drafts, refer to the project deadlines and submissions policy in the syllabus. So it's really important that you submit all 4 components. If you are missing any of the components, so say for example you don't submit draft 1 and then you just decide to submit draft 2 and all the rest of it, you can't do that. The project will be considered incomplete. So in order for it to be considered complete, you need to submit all 4 of these components by the posted deadlines, unless we've made arrangements for an extension, in which case you need to talk to me before the deadline. Alright y'all, well that's all I have to say in this video. If you have any questions, you can message me on Canvas or drop into the virtual office hours. Happy writing!